Right now, as you settle in to watch another apocalypse movie, your brain isn't just looking for entertainment. It's running ancient survival software that has been helping humans stay alive for millions of years. That zombie film isn't mindless fun. That disaster movie isn't just a guilty pleasure. Every time you watch the world end on screen, your brain treats it as practice. Because humans possess a remarkable ability that no other species has mastered to the same degree. We can mentally rehearse catastrophes that have never happened. And in doing so, we prepare for futures that may never come. When you press play on a zombie apocalypse movie, your brain immediately begins running what psychologists call mental simulation. Think of it as a flight simulator for survival. You're mentally rehearsing possible outcomes, testing decisions, and practicing responses in a completely safe environment. The fascinating part is that your brain doesn't fully distinguish between vividly imagined experiences and real ones. When you watch survivors barricading themselves against an approaching horde, you're not simply observing. You're unconsciously evaluating escape routes, calculating risks, managing resources, testing strategies, and imagining what you would do in the same situation. Psychologists sometimes refer to this as survival processing. We don't merely watch these stories, we simulate them. On a neural level, we rehearse danger as though our own lives depend on it. Neuroscientists studying threat response have shown that under extreme stress, the brain's higher planning centers can become impaired. When that happens, older and more instinctive survival systems take over. The same ancient circuitry that helped our ancestors survive predators, natural disasters, and resource shortages is still operating inside you today. Every apocalypse movie becomes another entry in your mental survival library. Another scenario. Another rehearsal, another lesson your brain quietly stores away. For our ancestors, the ability to imagine danger before it arrived could mean the difference between life and death. A rustle in the grass, a distant storm, a rival group approaching from the horizon. Those who could mentally simulate threats often survived long enough to pass on their genes, and that ancient ability never disappeared. It evolved. Today, instead of imagining predators lurking outside a cave, we watch pandemics, asteroid impacts, zombie outbreaks, and societal collapse unfold on giant screens. The scenarios have changed. The psychological machinery has not. Risk perception expert David Ropeek described risk perception as more than simply calculating probabilities. It involves emotion, fear, uncertainty, anticipation. Every time you watch civilization collapse on screen, you're exercising the same threat assessment systems that evolved to keep your ancestors alive. What stays with us after a survival story isn't simply the danger, it's the rehearsal, the feeling that we have somehow practiced for something, that we have gained experience without paying the real-world cost. Which means something surprising. Every zombie movie you've ever watched, every post-apocalyptic series you've binged, every disaster film that kept you glued to the screen. None of it was meaningless entertainment. It was your brain preparing for survival. Have you ever caught yourself mentally planning escape routes after a disaster movie, or wondering whether you'd actually be ready if something unexpected happened? Let me know in the comments, because what's happening inside your mind goes even deeper than survival. There's something even more profound taking place when you become absorbed in stories about the end of the world. You're not just preparing for personal survival, you're participating in a psychological process that helps humans cope with one of our deepest fears, the awareness that one day we will die. Humans are unique in many ways, but one of the most important is that we know our lives are temporary. We understand mortality, and that knowledge creates a problem no other species seems to face. How do you live a meaningful life while knowing it will eventually end? Psychologists have spent decades studying this question. One influential explanation is called terror management theory. The theory proposes that when people are reminded of death, they don't simply become fearful. They seek meaning. They strengthen relationships. They turn toward the beliefs, values, and communities that give their lives purpose. In laboratory experiments, researchers found that reminders of mortality often cause people to defend their cultural worldviews more strongly and seek deeper social connection. In other words, when humans confront death, they instinctively look for something larger than themselves. And this is where apocalypse stories become fascinating, because they allow us to encounter mortality from a safe distance. Every discussion about survival strategies, every debate over which zombie plan would actually work, every online conversation about surviving the collapse of civilization, every book club focused on post-apocalyptic fiction, All of it serves a deeper purpose. These stories transform fear into connection, individual anxiety into shared experience, existential uncertainty into collective meaning. What appears to be entertainment is often something much more human, a social ritual, a way of confronting our deepest fears together. And perhaps that's why apocalypse stories have never disappeared. They've existed for thousands of years. Long before zombie movies, long before disaster films, ancient civilizations told stories about great floods, collapsing kingdoms, and the end of the world. Not because they wanted destruction, because they were searching for meaning. Every generation imagines the apocalypse differently, but hidden beneath every version is the same question. What remains when everything else is gone? And maybe that's the strangest thing about apocalypse stories. They almost never focus on the apocalypse itself. Think about it. The asteroid, the virus, the zombies, the nuclear war. Those are usually just the backdrop. The real story is always about people. Who helps, who panics, who sacrifices, who betrays, who becomes a leader, who becomes family. Because when everything unnecessary is stripped away, apocalypse stories force us to confront a question that modern life rarely asks. What actually matters? And hidden inside these stories is the same hope humanity has carried for thousands of years, that when everything falls apart, something essential remains. Courage, connection, purpose, love, the things that make us human. So the next time you find yourself watching civilization collapse on a screen, remember this. Your brain isn't just rehearsing for disaster, it's asking a deeper question. If everything familiar disappeared tomorrow, who would you become? Because the reason apocalypse stories endure isn't that we're fascinated by the end of the world. It's that we're fascinated by what survives after it. And perhaps that's what these stories have always been about. Not the end of humanity, but the search for what makes humanity worth saving. If you enjoyed this exploration into the psychology of survival, mortality, and human nature, subscribe for more videos uncovering the hidden science behind everyday behavior. And be sure to watch our next video on why your brain craves horror movies.